right, so this is our first week of Spring Fling, and it's the first week of our new sermon series. And so, as I typically do, I want to start by asking you guys a question. We're in March, and so January wasn't that long ago. We can think back. How many of y'all started 2024 with something that you wanted to change in your life? How many of you made like a resolution, something that you were like, I want to change this, or there's this and I want to be better at this? All right, so those of you that raised your hands, I just want to ask, how's it going? Pretty good. Okay, hey, if it's good for you, then you would be the exception, because the vast majority of people, what we see, there was actually a study done of 45 million people that said they made resolutions. And the vast majority in this study quit on or before the second Friday of January. I made it like 2 weeks. So if you're in March and you're still going good, rock on. But I know for myself, there's a lot of things that I came in that I said I was going to be better about, that if I'm completely honest, I'm not really seeing much change. And the vast majority of us that make these promises, that make these resolutions, make them with really good intentions. Like nobody's like, this year I'm going to cuss more. This year I'm going to party more. I'm going to get drunk even more than I did last year. I'm going to be further away from God by the end of 2024 than I was in 2023. Like, we don't make those. We all make these good intention, how to make our lives even better and more beautiful, but yet we don't follow through. And the sad news is that so many of our goals by the end of this year will not have happened. We'll still be the same people we came into 2024 as. And so what I want to do tonight is I want to talk to those of you who said, yes, I made promises, I made resolutions. I know there's things in my life that want to change. If you're sitting here and you're like, I don't want to change nothing about what I got, I'm totally good, everything is perfect, then this isn't for you. You just rock on. But if you're here and you're like, I know there's areas of my life that I wish I could change. There's things that I hoped to have changed by now. There's things that I've tried to change. But yet you're here, and because of the ways that you've tried and failed, you're not sure if change is even possible. I want to talk to you. And so I'm calling this message When You're Sick of Being Stuck. I'm sick of being stuck. And so if you feel like this, know that you feel like so many of us here. You feel frustrated that you can't change. You're exhausted trying to change these things in your life year after year. You're embarrassed that, man, this is still in my life. I call myself a believer and I can't let this go. There may even be some shame and some guilt that follows you because you can't change. But the good news is that you're not alone. In fact, Paul, the guy who wrote over half of the New Testament, he understands what it's like to feel that way. He understands what it's like to want to do the right thing, but inevitably not do the right thing. These are his words in Romans 7, and they give me so much comfort. Look at what he says. This is Romans 7, verse 15. He says, I don't understand myself, for I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. He goes on to say, I don't want to do what is wrong, but I do it anyway. And then he says in verse 24, oh, what a miserable person I am. I just wonder if any of you can relate with Paul. If you can relate with me in feeling that exact same way. That I want to do right, but it's like no matter how hard I try, I find myself doing what is wrong. No matter how much I say I'm not going to do those things anymore, I find myself back in them. And this leads us to asking questions like, what's wrong with me? Like, I really said this year was going to be different. But I said the same thing last year and the year before that. And it feels like I've done everything that they say to do. Man, I set goals. I made all these promises. I bought a daily planner. I made a vision board. Like, I've done everything it takes to make changes. And so this series is called The Power to Change. And in it, we're going to reveal the fact that often you have good intentions. with making these changes or wanting to make these changes, but unfortunately, I would suggest that many of us, while we have the right intentions, we're using the wrong strategies. We're trying to change, but we're trying to change the wrong ways. And so the core of this series, The Power to Change, is this. What do we know about real change? About real change. And this is so important. This is the heart of the whole message, is that this. Real change is not behavior modification. Real change is spiritual transformation. It's not just changing what we do on the outside. It's opening up and it's allowing God to change who we are on the inside. It's not just about changing our behaviors. It's allowing God to do a spiritual transformation within. Not just an outward behavior modification. It's spiritual transformation. That's why Paul, who we just talked about in Romans 7, I'm trying to do right, but I can't. I don't want to do wrong, but I still do. He asked this question later on in Romans 7. He says, who will free me from this life that is dominated by sin and death? Thank God the answer is in Jesus Christ, our Lord. We see right there, it's not behavior modification. It's about a spiritual transformation that's got to take place. And so over the course of Spring Fling, the next few messages in this series, I want to talk with you and show you how we are trying to change the wrong ways. We're doing things to try to change our behaviors, and we have good intentions, but we're going about it the wrong way. And so tonight, there's three big ideas that we're going to cover, and these are three mindsets that Christians will adapt when it comes to change, when we recognize we need change. And two of these three we're going to see are wrong. But one that we'll see is correct. So the first one is a wrong mindset. Many people believe when it comes to change that it's got to be God, then me. God and then me. Right? God is the one who starts it. God draws me. His grace changes me. God does the work to save me and bring me in. But then God says, good luck. You're on your own. And many of us believe in this mindset. We believe in the God and then me mindset. Because we've been told by social media and the world around us that if it's going to be, then it's up to you. Right? You've got to go out and do this. You've got to make this life for yourself. It even comes out in the way that we speak, and you might not even realize that you have this mindset. Because if you're a Christian, but you still say things like, man, I'm trying to lose my temper. Man, I'm trying to stop cussing, darn it. Except you don't say darn it. Or I'm trying to get closer to God. I'm trying to stop spending 4 hours every single day just scrolling through TikTok and Instagram. We know that God saved us, but yet we still believe that it's up to us to change. God did his part, then it's me. A God, then me mindset. The second one that's wrong is God, not me. So the first one, the God, then me mindset says it's all about my effort. But this second one is actually the opposite of the first. It shifts all the responsibility from me to God. God does everything, and I just kind of sit back and watch it happen. All right, I don't have to do anything. It's God, not me. For example, I don't like my job. I'm not saying I don't like my job. Don't tell your dad I said that. That example, let's say that I don't like my job. I love my job. Let's say that I don't like my job. And so I just say, man, I'm going to quit. Then I know because God provides. He's just got to provide me with a new one. He's going to bring me a new one that's better, and everything in my life is great. I just got to sit back and let God do it. Or for you, this year, I'm going to make all A's. Maybe some of you were not even like, I'm not even going to kid myself this year with that one. Like, we ain't even going to try for that. Maybe just pass. This year, I'm going to pass. I'm going to make it to the next grade. I'm going to graduate. But I'm not going to pay any attention. Like, I'm not going to do my homework. I'm not going to study. But I will pray right before the test, and I know that then God will make me pass. Or this year, man, I want to get closer to God. But at the same time, if the Bible wasn't an app on my phone, I don't know where my Bible is. I haven't even opened that app in 5 years. I haven't been involved in a church really since COVID. And if you're wondering why you're not close to God, it's right there. Because we take this God, not me mindset of I can do my thing and it's just up to God. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But we said there's 3 mindsets. The first 2 are wrong and are dangerous. There's God, then me. God, not me. And the correct one, the last one that we're going to see, is that it's God through me. How do we really change? It's not behavior modification, it's spiritual transformation, right? It's God through me. And so I want to show you how Paul recognized this principle of it being God through me. The guy who said, I'm trying to change, but I can't. The guy who said, I don't want to do wrong, but I still do. Who in the world can save me? Only Jesus can. I want to show you how he processes this in his writing. This is what he says. I love the humility and the dependence that you see on God. This is verse 9. It says, for I am the least of the apostles. Right? Just right away, this guy who wrote half the New Testament, right? He started a bazillion churches, and yet he says, based on my qualifications, based on my sin, I rank low. He says, I'm not good. I'm the least of these. Hey, you're good. Paul says, I'm the least of these. He says, I don't even deserve to be called an apostle. Think about that. The guy who wrote half the New Testament says, I don't even deserve to be an apostle, to be a follower of Christ. Watch this, though. He says, I've persecuted the church of God. This is the Paul who was out hunting Christians, ripping them out of churches and killing them. This is that Paul. He says, based on me, I don't deserve this. Based on my skills, my abilities, my effort, my works, my education, I'm not good enough. But by the grace of God. He says, but by the grace of God. And so I want you to see is that it is that same grace that saves you. It's the same grace that then changes you. God's grace is not just for our salvation, it's for our transformation. And when we take on those other mindsets, we're saying, God, you were good enough to save me, but you're not good enough to change me. I've got to do that. And Paul says, no, it is by his grace. It's the same grace that saves us. It changes us. He says, but by the grace of God, I am what I am, and his grace to me was not without effect. In other words, I'm not very good. I don't deserve this, but his grace has impacted me and did a work in me. And then watch this. He says, no, I worked harder than all of them. This guy who said he was the least is now recognizing, man, I tried. I worked harder than all of them. And no, when he said this, like, he backed it up. He got up earlier. He stayed up later. He started more churches, raised up more leaders. Dude preached more fearlessly. He was beaten and beaten and beaten and left for dead. He was whipped and snake bitten and shipwrecked, and he came back. And he was still persecuted. They tried to kill him, but he wouldn't stop. And so he says, I worked harder than all of them. I brought everything in me, gave everything that I had. And then he said, yet not I. Yet none of that was enough, but the grace of God that was with me. I'm not any good. I don't deserve to be here, but the grace of God. He brings it all back to God. He says, God did something in me. His grace was not without effect. And it's the same grace that saved him, that changed him. Real change isn't God and then you. Real change isn't God, not you. Real change comes by God through you, because it's not behavior modification. It's spiritual transformation. And you may be sitting here and like, man, that sounds great. Good job. That sounds great on Wednesday, Sunday, but what about Monday, right? What about tomorrow when we go back to school? I go back into this world and I still do the things that I don't want to do. That temptation is still there. when the people around me in my class, on my team, are just so dumb. And I just want to lose my temper and tell them a million things they should be doing instead of what they're doing. How do I see change? How do I stop doing what I don't want to do? How do I do what God wants me to do? If real change is God through you, what does that look like? So this is so important. You may want to write this down if you're taking notes. I want you to pay such close attention to this. Don't miss this, okay? For real change to be spiritual transformation. I don't see nearly enough of y'all writing this down. Y'all must not believe me. I told y'all to write this down. This is the key to the whole thing. For change to be spiritual transformation, it has to be spiritual. Right? And I know you're all just like, for change to be spiritual transformation, it has to be spiritual. Did everybody get that? For you to experience a spiritual transformation, it has got to be by God's Spirit. It is never going to be by your willpower that you experience spiritual transformation. So here's what's going to happen. New Year's is going to come again next year. Or maybe you just start with the next school year, next sports season, and you're saying, I'm sick of being stuck. I want to make a change. I want this year, this season to be different. And you're going to have your plan. That's going to be your how. And what I want to suggest for you is to add a spiritual to your why and to your how. You need to have a spiritual why and a spiritual how to these things that you want to see change in, for them to really take place, for you to see real change. It's got to be spiritual. Your spiritual why is God's purpose for you. That's your spiritual why. And your spiritual how is God's power through you. It's not just about behavior modification. It's seeing spiritual transformation take place. So how does this work? Real life example. You get that notification, I don't know if it comes every week, that says, this week you spent 92 hours of screen time. Like whatever it is. Like you're up 48% from last week. And you're like, sweet. Next week going for 50. Like, and hopefully you see that and you're like, man, I should really spend less time on my phone. That's not enough. You need to have a spiritual motivation, a spiritual why. So what would it be for, man, I need to spend less time on my phone? Make that spiritual. Who is God? Right? God is love. The greatest commandment we see is to love God, love others. How loving are you if you spend that much time connected to a screen? Your spiritual why could just be that I want to honor God. I want to love God, and so I want to be more engaged with the people around me. Not just through likes and comments, but by actually being present with the people around me. That could be your spiritual why. You say, I want to be better about serving, about giving back. Your spiritual why could be that everything I have belongs to God. My talents, my abilities, everything He's blessed me with is from God. And so because of that, my spiritual why is I'm going to steward what He's given me wisely. I'm going to use what He's blessed me with to be a blessing to others, to be generous, to not waste the talents and abilities He's given me. Or maybe the change you want to see is that you want to get in better shape. And your worldly why could be because I want to look good on spring break, so that way I can go to the beach and take all the pics and make my ex jealous. Like, it's coming in a few weeks, and you can, like, look away, but you know it's going to be you in a couple weeks, posting, like, love the beach, but also, like, come on. We know. Wishing I was here, but also look at me. What if instead you got a spiritual why? And you said, man, Scripture says that my body is a temple, so I want to honor God with what He's given me. I'm not going to view my body as an object to to try and get the approval of people around me. But I'm going to honor God with what he's given me. And so you've got to find a spiritual why if you want to see real change take place. For spiritual transformation to take place, it's got to be spiritual. Then you're going to want to find a spiritual how. And I love what Zechariah says. This is an Old Testament prophet. This is in chapter 4, verse 6. It says, "Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord Almighty." Not by might, not by power. It is by God's Spirit. When it's God's Spirit who is working through you, it's not me. It's his grace through me. You're not on your own. You have a stronger power supporting you. I like to use the example of one of those moving sidewalks. I know what I'm talking about. You see them in airports or amusement parks. And like some people just get on them and stand. That's not how you're supposed to use it. You're supposed to get on it and you're still supposed to walk. But it's moving you. It's going to make you go a little bit faster. And now there's some people that just like too proud, I guess, to use a moving sidewalk. Because there's always some people just walking beside it. And I'm like, why not just use the moving sidewalk? Like, it's so much easier, so much nicer. But man, when you get on one of those things, like, you've never felt closer to God than on one of those things. Like, you get moving. Like, some of those things got some power, and like, you put in the littlest bit of effort, and like, you're gone. Like, they get some force behind you. You're putting in less effort, because you're just kind of gliding, but yet you feel so much faster. You're getting there so much quicker. That's God's power through me. It's not just me anymore. It is him through me. That is where we unlock our fullest potential to see change. When it's not me, it's not my might, it's not my power, but it's the Spirit of the Lord. When there's a spiritual why connected to a spiritual how, you don't see outward modification, you see a spiritual transformation that leads to real and lasting change. And so ask yourselves, what do you want to change? Where do you need to change? Maybe for you, you just need to overcome an addiction. There's some sin that's been in your life, and no matter how hard you've tried, you cannot let it go. It could be drinking, vaping, cussing, pornography, lying, gossiping. Whatever that addiction in your life is, maybe that's where you say, God, I know I need to change. Maybe you want to get more organized. You want to pray more consistently and with stronger faith. Add a spiritual why to those things. If it's an addiction, you can say that with Jesus, I'm going to overcome this because I'm not a slave to sin. I've been set free by his power, and so I'm not going to let this addiction rule my life for another day. You want to get organized. Add a spiritual why to that. God is a God of order. Therefore, I'm going to order my life so I can order it around the things that matter most, which is glorifying God and giving my best to him. You want to pray more consistently with more faith. Add a spiritual why to that. Jesus is the number one priority in my life. Therefore, I'm going to give him my full attention every morning, every night. I'm going to devote this time to him to block out all distractions. So your first assignment is this, and we'll build on this in the weeks to come, but you've got to define your spiritual why. You've got to put a spiritual why to the things that you want to see change in. Then we're going to get into your spiritual how. And what that is it's God's power through you. It's not going to be just God. You can't just sit back and watch it happen. But it's also not going to be just you. Because your power, your strength, your skills are not enough. It's got to be God through you. So there's a statement I want to give you to just encourage you to adopt through this series. And it's so meaningful and powerful. And I would encourage you to just take a picture of this, write it down, whatever, but just say it again and again and again until you believe this to be true. This is God through me. This is how we see change. This is it. The statement says, I am disciplined. Christ in me is stronger than the wrong desires in me. And you just say that to yourself until you believe it. I am disciplined. Christ in me is stronger than the wrong desires in me. And the reason this is important is because by nature, we are not disciplined. My own sinful nature is not disciplined. But if I say this and I declare that I am disciplined, it's not me, it's Christ in me that's stronger than those wrong desires. So then when you're tempted to go out and party, it's not just willpower that's going to say, no, not this weekend. Not anymore, not this year. I'm not going to spend every Friday night after the football game going and getting drunk with my friends. Not this year. But here's the thing, it's not your willpower that's going to be able to say that. It's Christ's power. It's God through you. When you're at home and you're tempted to go and look at stuff that you know you shouldn't be, your willpower is not going to be enough to say no. It is Christ through you. It's his power that is enough. When you're tempted to yell and fight and cuss and go back at the people that are slandering you and criticizing you, your willpower is not going to be enough to turn the other cheek and walk away. It's Christ's power. It's God through you, because what do we know? Real change isn't God and then you. Real change is not God, not you. Real change is God through you. It's not behavior modification. It's a spiritual transformation. This isn't just a change of behavior. It's a change of heart. And don't miss this, because this is where so many people go wrong. If you change your behavior, but you don't change your heart, the behavior will come back. If you change your behavior, but you don't change your heart, the behavior is going to come back. It's got to be a spiritual transformation to be real and to be lasting. That's why we're not trying, we're trusting. It's a spiritual motivation. It's a spiritual power that enables us to do this real and lasting change. It's just a reflection of God's power through you. Because when you overcome one of these things, don't be like, hey, I did it. Everybody, look, I ain't cussed in a week. Look at me. It's a reflection of God's power through you, because we know you can't do this on your own. And if you do, it's not going to last unless you change your heart. So if you're sick of being stuck in these same habits, these same patterns, then I've got really good news for you. There's a power outside of yourself that can help you change. Why haven't you changed? You've tried to, but you haven't. You still procrastinate, even though you said you wouldn't. You still skip church whenever it's convenient, even though you said you were going to make it a priority. You still look at things that you know you shouldn't, even though you said, man, I'm not going to do that anymore. You're still holding grudges. You're still spending more money than you should. You're still putting value on things that don't last. Still wasting your life consumed with things that aren't eternal. Why? Even though we say we want to change, why do we still do these things? And there's a lot of reasons we could get into, but there's one primary problem. One primary reason, and it's almost always spiritual. It's almost always spiritual. Why haven't you changed? Because in most cases, you're trying to meet a need, make a change, relieve a hurt with something besides God's grace. You're trying to accomplish these things with something besides God's grace. That's why you haven't seen change. You're trying to meet a real need, a real problem, relieve a real hurt with something besides God's grace. That's why the same Paul we've been talking about, who said, I want to do the right things, but don't. Who can help me? Thank God Jesus can. The same Paul who said, I am the least of these. I'm not good enough. But I know that God's grace changed me, so I believe that his grace through me is strong enough. That same Paul said this. He said, God said, my grace is all you need. My grace is all you need, not an app to hold you accountable, not a planner, not a diet. I mean, all those things are great, and use that stuff if you want, but the heart of your power is always going to be from God's grace. He says that is all that you need. So when you don't have the willpower and the strength and you failed again, like we all do, Look at what God says. He says, my power works best in weakness. So now I am glad to boast about my weakness so that the power of Christ can work through me, Paul says. It is God through me. God through me. So if you find that area, you've identified it, that man, you just can't change. Maybe try something different. Maybe try to stop being ashamed of it and start embracing it. Saying, man, I'm not ashamed that I can't change this anymore. Because I realize now that it was never within my power to change it. But man, I'm going to embrace this because while I can't change it, this is an area of my life that God can. He can change. His power can change. His grace can change. Because I know that Scripture says when I am weak, His power is made perfect within me. And then when you mess up, you don't fall and just crumble in this self-pity of, man, I failed again. I'm the worst. But when you know it's God through me, then when you mess up, you still know His grace was enough to save you. And that means His grace is enough to change you. His grace is enough to forgive you. And His grace is enough to strengthen you to get back up when you fail and try again. Because it's God through you. This is not behavior modification. It's a spiritual transformation. Jesus didn't come to just make us better. He came to rescue us from our sin. He came to save us from depravity. He came to change us from sick to healthy, from lost to found. He came to free us from the chains of sin. But yet so many of us are walking around enslaved to these addictions and this sin in our life because we're trying to do it on our own. But Jesus says, who the Son has set free is free indeed. So stop letting those things rule your life. Stop trying to change it on your own and begin to see that it is only God through me that I can see change. Real change is not God, then you. It's not God, not you. Real change is God through you. So tonight, I don't know where you're at. I don't know where you're at in your walk with Christ. I don't know what He's speaking to your heart right now. But my prayer and my hope is that you've identified an area of change in your life. There is something that you know you need to change. Maybe you've tried to change it. Maybe you haven't because you just know that's too much for me. This is just how I am. This is just who I am. Can't change it. I'm always going to be anxious. I'm always going to be fearful. That's just me. No, it's not. There's a God who can change you. His grace is enough to set you free from those things. So maybe tonight you just need to go and get on your knees before God and just say, God, I'm done trying to do this on my own. I recognize it is only you who can change me and who can save me. And so maybe tonight you just let go and you start to allow God to speak into your life and work through you to begin to see real change take place. And that doesn't mean you're not going to have to put in some effort. You're still going to have to do some work because it's not God, not you. It's God through you. Or maybe tonight all this talk has made you realize, man, I don't know this God they keep talking about. All this stuff sounds good, but I don't know God. So maybe tonight you see, man, there's things in my life that I need to change. God has convicted your heart of some real change that needs to take place. But maybe your first step is not releasing control to say it's God through me now. Maybe your first step is saying, God, I'm giving you my life. I've been trying to control not just this one area, but I've been trying to drive my whole life. I've been the one in control, the one in making the decisions. But tonight I see that every time I try and take control, it always fails. It always leaves me dry. It always leaves me wanting more. And so I'm telling you tonight, there's a God who saves. There's a God who changes, and there's a God who can free you from those things. He can relieve you of that burden of feeling like it's all up to you. He's here with us. There are people here that will pray with you, talk with you, answer your questions. But again, it takes some effort on your part. You've got to be willing to get up, to go to God. Yes, He'll meet you where you're at, but you've got to take that first step to Him. And I'm telling you, when you do, you can come bold before the throne of God because He understands and He'll welcome you with open arms. So if that is you, don't walk out of here the same way you came in. Don't go another day trying to make all the right choices, trying to fix your life on your own, because you can't and you won't. But you can walk out if you're set free and changed because you had an encounter with God. And you now know it is God's power through you. You've been set free by the Spirit. And you're walking in freedom. So tonight, however the Lord is leading you, however He's calling you to respond, you do so, however the Lord is leading you.